So good afternoon, everyone. Today we are presenting 4-H Record Books Made Easy. Our presenters today are Rose Garitano, the Chittenden County 4-H educator, and Sarah Kleinman, our State 4-H director. So I'm going to turn the mic over to them, and they're going to show us how to make our record book process go smoother.
Excellent. Thank you, Lauren. So as Lauren mentioned, today's topic is 4-H Record Books Made Easy. And the question is why? Why does 4-H have record books? And you can see here some reasons why. They're useful skills for one's personal life and career. They help with future planning and goal setting. They're also a requirement for being a member in good standing. And we also hear over and over again from 4-H alumni who love looking back at their record books many years later. It helps them to feel a sense of accomplishment at all they've done. It also helps them to keep positive memories alive and are also a source of data for us 4-H staff so that we can use the stories and the goals and understanding how our 4-H youth have accomplished those goals and what steps they've gone through to both better the program, but also to report impact to our stakeholders, perhaps legislators who may make funding or other decisions. And so we appreciate everybody who, all the youth and parents and volunteers who help to make record books completed and turned into our offices, and hopefully this presentation today will help you to understand how to make them, how to complete them in a quality manner, and also how to continue with them so that they are not a burden and people actually enjoy, our 4-H members enjoy this process. So what is the difference between member versus project records? There are two books to keep that should go hand in hand in a binder. 4-H members may complete multiple projects every year, and thus project records are kept over the course of a year. The member record, however, is only completed once. It helps to understand sort of the 4-H experience and their community experiences. And then the project records help to, of course, document the very specific projects. There may be 4 or 5 projects throughout the year, and so each opportunity, each project record that's completed then could get placed behind the member record in a binder. Let's step aside for just a moment, though, and discuss a little bit about what is a 4-H project. Ideally, projects are determined by the youth, but are facilitated by a volunteer or perhaps a team leader. Typically, clubs have a set project, such as being a horse club, and the members then join because that's the topic they wish to learn more about. Or it could be that a club is more general, and each year the youth that participate in that club pick the topics they want to explore. Perhaps it's arts and crafts, it could be community service or leadership, and it changes based upon the participant's interest. Projects are usually made up of activities that together allow for 6 or more of sequential learning with skills that either build upon each other or are linked together in a logical manner. For example, a robotics club might start out with an introduction project and using a product called WeDo's, which are more of a plug-and-play, Lego, very basic type of robot. And that helps to lay the foundation then for robots, and then after a few sessions, those participants may branch out to the NXT robotics kits, which are much more advanced for building and programming. So over time, at least 6 hours of, again, the sequential building experience is really what makes up that project. I also want you to keep in mind that Clover Buds, or those youth who participate in 4-H that are between ages 5 and 7, should engage in standalone activities and not fully participate in the same project work that older 4-H members that are ages 8 and further may do. While some Clover Buds may be developmentally ready, others may not be, and that can result in frustration and overall poor 4-H experience. The ideal scenario is that 4-H Clover Buds get grouped together and have their own opportunities and activities that are standalone, separate from the larger club, but then they all come together for project meetings and events like community service. So record book variety. As I mentioned before, we have a member record, and there's just one. There's also a Clover Bud record, which helps to keep track of those activities, and that's completed once. You can see, though, that we have a bunch of different project books which are more specific to the major project areas that we see in Vermont that have higher numbers of youth participation. If there isn't a specific project record, then the general one should be used. All of these can be found on our website under 4-H projects. And I'm going to turn this over now to Rose Garitano, the 4-H educator for Chittenden County, as she will share about how best to fill out the books and what an educator typically looks for in high-quality records. Rose?
Okay, so thank you for being here, everybody. So we're going to look first at the member record, which captures the general experiences that kids have had that aren't related to their project work. So I'm a volunteer as well as working for UVM Extension, and my club, for example, does a horse project, but in our member record, that's where they'd write down that we did an activity with map and compass skills, or we made GIMP bracelets, we did chemistry experiments, we visited the SPCA, those kinds of things that you do when you're together as a group that aren't related to a project are part of what goes in the member record. That member record has a section for activities like the ones that I just listed or mentioned. And then there's also a section for leadership, community service, and non-4-H activities that the kids can record. If we look at an example of activities that might be in the member record, we've got a list here that is, this looks a little bit like the actual document, and I'd like to ask any of our people that are participating today if they can see anything that might be done differently on this page, and you can type that into a chat box. Things that maybe need fixing. Okay, and I'm seeing some comments that are coming in, and I'll just go down through that list. It says Halloween parade, and there's some things that are misspelled there. Well, that's okay. That's okay. We don't want kids to get hung up on spelling. When you're working on the record book, if somebody's saying, how do you spell parade, you can suggest to that child, just spell it as best you can. And if they really want to fix it before the end of the year, they can go back and do that. But some of that creative spelling actually becomes a wonderful part of their personal history when they look back on it. For the second entry, CAF open house answered questions, that might be something that belongs in a project record if that this particular child was doing a dairy project. Looking at that next entry, I can barely read it. I don't know if you can. We want kids to try to make their work legible, but if it's a little sloppy, that's also okay. The key skill that we're trying to build here is that skill of keeping track of what you've done and doing so in a timely manner. So neatness sometimes goes by the wayside. Dairy judging, maybe that belongs in the project record, and some detail would help there too. Was it a contest or club activities? Did they judge pictures of dairy animals, or were they judging live animals? So detail would be helpful. And that same holds true for action exhibit at Regional Day. Not sure what that action exhibit was about. Maybe that belongs in a project record if it was related to the project, or would be better suited for the project record. And I'd also, again, like to know what that was about. But if you have something like dairy judging written in the member record, and that member was doing a dairy project, it's not the end of the world if something is in the quote-unquote wrong place. But just to summarize some of those common mistakes, and mistakes is in quotes there, is things we're looking for. We'd like kids to learn to provide enough detail so that what's there is meaningful. Information might be in the wrong place, which is not a crime, and not filling in each section across a row, leaving out dates, and that was something that was missing on that. Simply leaving a chart completely blank. We want to teach kids, and this is something that comes up if you've ever been on a hiring committee, when people leave things blank. Did they skip it? Teach the kids to write not applicable or something like that. Or, and this relates to something that has come in the chat box, could they put it here if they don't do dairy but went? Yes. So if they went to that activity but they're not doing a dairy project, it could go in that activities page. Or if they were, and I misread the chat comment, if they were doing a dairy project and they put it in the member record instead, they could write see member record in their dairy record so that a reviewer would know where to look for that information that connected with their project. So in a project record, the general things that you can expect to see then that will be different than the member record, the members would have set goals at the beginning of the project with their leaders, and so leaders are signing off with on those. They'd have, if it's an animal project, they'd have some details about that animal and the project, including charts like the health care or showing feed. There might be a financial page related to the project. But if we jump down to journal, that's another key part of the project. They're keeping track of what they've been doing with their club to learn about their project. And then there's a project summary page, as well as an opportunity. We encourage the kids to include things like pictures or maybe clippings related to their project. Within the project journal portion, these are some examples of some entries that might appear, and I'd like to ask anybody that's participating to tell me what they think might be better. These are not necessarily related to one project, so they might be things that showed up in different project books, but what might be better about these entries? Okay, and a comment has come in. Where did they go? What did they learn? A little more detail, need specifics. And those are really the key things. So Fun Day, not sure what that was. Dates would be included, and that's a good point. I didn't frame this in the chart format that would appear, but dates should be included and some description of what happened on that Fun Day, so detail. For work on a scrapbook, I'd like to know maybe they learned about framing a text or took pictures. A photography project, often someone, member will just record, took pictures, took pictures, took pictures, took pictures. They really should be working with a leader so that there are different specific activities. So maybe they took pictures from high and low viewpoints. And then certainly with a field trip, and this was suggested, where did you go? What did you learn? So what we're really looking for in those journal entries, without having kids write a novel, but we're looking for detail so that it's anyone looking at it can figure out what was done at a particular project meeting or 4-H event, and also looking for some variety so that if it's a true project, it's not just repetition of one thing over and over again. So I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah, who's going to talk about accommodations and provide some tips for making record bookkeeping easier. And easier is key. It's to say that it's easy might not be accurate. It does take some work, but it's a skill that can be learned and is important to teach.
Thank you, Rose. And while we're relatively new to hosting these webinars, it is possible there may be somebody on the teleconference only, not looking at the slides. So at the end, after a couple more slides, I will open up the phone lines if you have any questions to see if whomever is listening there might want to participate by asking some questions. So currently we're talking about accommodations. One thing Vermont 4-H does not want to see happen is to learn that youth are dropping out of the program because of this record book requirement. 4-H is supposed to be fun as well as educational, and 4-H staff welcome creative ways to share and document the 4-H experience. We've done some training recently on alternatives to record books with their volunteers and have tried to disseminate that information, but the more and more we can let folks know that alternatives are possible and accommodations can be made, I think the more we'll get that message out and hopefully stop learning about youth who may be frustrated by this record book requirement. There are a few key elements, however, to include, but there are lots of ways to include them when creating your own record, be it visually, artistically, technologically, or other. The key message, though, is to always reach out to your 4-H educator to share ideas and desires so you're not caught off guard months down the road. The basic requirements for record books, which are listed on the slide, are that goals are set, the effort is documented, and there is a reflection piece. And I will talk a little bit more about those in just a moment. So whether it's an accommodation related to a cognitive or physical disability or simply a desire to explore more creatively in record keeping, here are some ideas for alternatives. An adult might scribe for the member if the member has a hard time writing. You can either write them or use a keyboard as we're converting all of our record books over to fillable PDF documents so that you can save them and type into them. There may be permission given to skip some sections for one reason or another. Use of alternative pages to show requested information. As Rose mentioned, you may end up writing something in the member record and you get to that same question in the project record. Rather than skipping it, write C member record so that whomever's reviewing can reflect back and note that. Again, maybe using the generic record book, the general one, instead of a specific project record for one reason or another. And then here are some alternative methods, which we're calling non-traditional record books. A child may opt to put together a PowerPoint presentation, or maybe they want to record using a video and create a video to show the goals and what was learned throughout the year. There's a tool called Prezi, which is similar to a PowerPoint presentation, or maybe even Pinterest. If you can create a Pinterest page, an online corkboard that somehow documents the images, the places you've been, the goals, those are all acceptable. However, the key again is to communicate with your 4-H educator, make sure that we're in agreement with the types of alternatives and accommodations that need to be met, and to ensure that the 3 elements, that goals are identified and described, and the work that has led up to reaching those goals, the 4-H experience was documented, and that there's a reflection piece similar to the My 4-H experience. All of those elements should be included for these alternatives to be useful. There's ways to help get the job done. Record books, no matter the format, should be easier if they're completed in small amounts on a regular basis, and not for folks that wait until the very end of the year to complete the record book. Of course, we'll lose our memory. We won't remember a lot of the things that we've done, and a lot more time will be spent trying to pull those pieces together. Incentives will help get youth to complete them, perhaps, whether it's being allowed a coveted spot or role at a meeting or getting to make an important decision. There's certainly ways to grant incentives without expending dollars or rewarding with treats. So you may want to provide small rewards for youth who remember to bring record books or for having them up to date on a regular basis. And then leaders too can keep a record, maybe using a big giant sheet of newsprint and writing down what kids should write down so that some of the youth can help either copy that information or jog their memory. We went on this field trip, and then allow the youth some time to recall what it was their individual experiences were like on that given field trip. So there's some tools and techniques that the leaders may employ as well to help the youth with their record keeping. It's okay not to keep records, especially if the member just enjoys being part of the group but doesn't anticipate taking part in larger statewide activities. However, there are some limitations if a 4-H member chooses not to keep those records. We have that rule called a member in good standing, and if a 4-H member chooses not to keep records, then they will not be considered what we call a member in good standing, which again limits those opportunities. They may not be able to represent at Vermont at some of our out-of-state events and competitions. Participation on teen boards and serving in certain leadership roles may also be limited, and some foundations as well have scholarship requirements that are tied to that member in good standing. So again, it's okay not to keep them, but if one chooses not to keep them, then there are some limitations placed on that individual 4-H member. So in general, helping the job get done, make record keeping a standard expectation if possible. Let members know that they will, what they will gain by doing that, and ask them. Make members aware of the benefits of being a member in good standing, as I just mentioned, and that's also listed on our documents that are online, and at the front of the member records. And recognize what has been done. Let's celebrate accomplishments, even those small ones. Lots of ways to have some awards and some parties and maybe a crazy dance party, something a little bit different to let everybody know how proud we are of them for keeping those records up to date when it may not be the most fun part of the 4-H experience. But again, if you think that that's a concern in your club, reach out to your 4-H educator and have that conversation so we can figure out some alternatives for you. And with that, hopefully some of these tools and tricks and just some of this information clarifies the 4-H record and makes it a little bit easier for you to have those completed in your 4-H club. And at this point, we'll pause and ask if there's any questions. And I will open up the microphones, and hopefully we won't get lots of feedback. Anybody have any questions? You can either type it in the chat box or push that talk button, or just speak if there is somebody on the phone line. Okay, well, it doesn't look like anybody's typing. So with that, thank you so much for your time. This webinar will be placed up on our website in the next few days, and we hope to see you again next month. Thank you very much for participating.
Thank you.